hauling hope. Dust swirled around the battered pickup as Dusty pulled into the loading zone. Sterling Enterprises loomed, a glass and steel monolith that seemed to mock the dented truck and the faded hope in his eyes. He'd seen buildings like this before, monuments to a life he wasn't sure he could ever provide for Lily. He killed the engine, the silence amplifying the knot of anxiety twisting in his stomach. This hauling job was a lifeline, a chance to finally catch up on bills and maybe, just maybe, buy Lily that new art set she'd been eyeing. The loading dock was pristine, a stark contrast to the grime clinging to his work boots. He grabbed his dolly, the metal cold against his calloused hands, and headed inside. A bored-looking security guard, perched behind a polished desk, barely glanced up. Sterling, 42nd floor. Sign in. Dusty scribbled his name and company, Miller's Hauling, one man, one truck, and a whole lot of grit, figuring the guard wouldn't read it anyway. The elevator hummed, swallowing him whole as it ascended. The 42nd floor opened onto a reception area so minimalist it felt sterile. A single orchid sat on a vast, empty desk. Behind it, a door of frosted glass read Eleanor Sterling, CEO. A voice, sharp and clear as shattered glass, cut through the silence. Miller? Come in. He hesitated, wiping his sweaty palms on his jeans before pushing the door open. Eleanor Sterling was even more imposing than the building. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, her back to him, the city sprawling beneath her feet. She wore a dress the color of storm clouds and heels that looked like they could double as weapons. She turned, her gaze sweeping over him with an unnerving intensity. Her eyes, the color of winter ice, held a flicker of something unreadable. You're late. Traffic, he mumbled, instantly regretting the lame excuse. Excuses are a waste of time, Mr. Miller. I value efficiency. She gestured to a stack of boxes against the far wall. They were larger than he'd anticipated, and the labels screamed fragile, archival materials. These need to be moved to the storage facility downtown. Be careful, some of these documents are irreplaceable. He nodded, already calculating how he was going to manage this. He'd pictured smaller boxes, easier to maneuver. Right? I'll get started. He approached the stack, assessing the weight of the top box. It was heavier than it looked. He bent, wrapping his arms around it, feeling the cardboard dig into his skin. He lifted, grunting with the effort, his back protesting the strain. Ms. Sterling watched him, her expression unreadable. He staggered slightly, fighting to maintain his balance. He needed to get this done, needed the money, needed to prove he could handle it. He took a step, then another, his muscles screaming. He had to get it to the dolly, just a few more feet. Careful, Mr. Miller, Miss Sterling said, her voice devoid of sympathy. I wouldn't want you to damage anything. Red heels and whispers. The buzzing lights, a fractured chorus, underscored the complaint in Dusty's lower back. He strained, maneuvering another heavy carton onto the hand truck, the corrugated edges digging into his palms. A swipe of his forearm across his sweaty forehead revealed her. A jolt of color, scarlet, bisected the warehouse's drab landscape. Red stilettos tapped a staccato rhythm on the concrete. Miss Sterling. Near the loading dock, arms folded, she emanated a glacial control. Unease, sharp and sudden, needled him. He avoided her gaze, busying himself with securing the load with a thick black strap. He propelled the dolly toward the staging area, its wheels issuing a mournful groan. He felt her observation like a palpable pressure. Keep your head down. Focus. Johnson got the axe, a gravelly voice rasped close by. Dusty turned to Fitzwilliam, his face a roadmap of wrinkles from years of hard labor. A nod from Fitzwilliam indicated Miss Sterling. Crossed her, he did. Quizzed her about the Ramirez stuff. Poof. Gone. Dusty's grip tightened on the dolly. Johnson was a hard worker. Fitzwilliam scoffed. Hard ain't enough for the Ice Queen. She demands perfection. Or consequences. His voice dropped further. Heard she's been poking around, looking for areas to streamline. Layoffs are coming, you hear me? The blood seemed to recede from Dusty's face. Layoffs threatened everything. Lily depended on him. He had to hold on to this. He offloaded the carton, meticulously stacking it with the others. He fought the burn in his lungs, the persistent ache in his knees. He had to push harder. Become essential. He chanced another glance at the loading bay. Miss Sterling remained a silent sentinel. Her scrutiny felt like being pinned beneath glass. He imagined her cataloging every drop of perspiration, every stressed sinew, every flicker of doubt. He straightened, attempting to project an aura of unshakable competence. She slowly unfurled her arms, the gesture languid, almost a performance. A slight tilt of her head, a barely perceptible narrowing of her eyes. Then she pivoted and departed, the echo of her heels fading into the immensity of the space, leaving Dusty alone with his dread and the towering stack of boxes that awaited him. A box of memories. The attic air, stagnant and heavy, tasted of dust and time's leavings. Dusty coughed, wiping grime from his forehead, the gesture leaving a streak on his skin. Another box. He wrestled it from the teetering pile, its cardboard protesting under the burden. Downstairs, Lily remained blissfully unaware, absorbed in the bright world of her toys. He wanted to preserve that innocence, to shelter her from the harsh edges of their existence. He lowered the box, its impact a dull boom in the echoing space above. A faded label, barely visible, memories, penned in a looping, feminine script. He hesitated, a knot forming in his stomach. Memories were a costly indulgence. Yet, a persistent curiosity tugged at him. He traced the box's edge with a hardened thumb, then tore the brittle tape. Inside, cradled among brittle yellowed newsprint and faded petals, lay a collection of mementos, a tarnished silver locket, a clutch of smooth, river stones, a threadbare teddy, its I long lost. Then he saw it. A photograph. He lifted it, his fingers trembling. It was an old monochrome print, the corners softened by years. A boy, perhaps 7 or 8, beamed before what appeared to be a time-worn fence. His dark hair sprung in disarray, his eyes sparkled with mischief. He wore patched dungarees and a t-shirt several sizes too large. Dusty froze, staring. The air seemed to grow thin and cold. The tiny dust devils caught in the weak sunlight seemed suspended. A pressure built in his chest, his throat tightened. It was him. It had to be. The slope of the nose, the cut of the chin, the slight quirk of the left brow, undeniably, unequivocally him. But impossible. He had no recollection of this. No memory of those clothes, that fence, that life. His childhood was a wasteland of deprivation and overcast skies, a relentless circuit of foster homes. No sunny fields, no carefree smiles. Only the brutal calculus of survival. He flipped the photograph, seeking a clue, a name, anything to decipher the improbable image. The back was unmarked, save for a faint yellow stain. His heart slammed against his ribs. A wave of giddiness washed over him. Was this a cruel joke? Some warped illusion? He raked a hand through his hair, the stiff strands scratching his scalp. He glanced down at the photograph again, his gaze probing, questioning. The boy in the picture continued to grin, oblivious to the inner storm he had ignited. A past estranged from him. A past beyond reconciliation. The revelation. Dusty's thumb, roughened by years of labor, traced the spectral outline of the man in the faded photo. A keepsake tucked within his wallet, a faint echo of a life nearly forgotten. He slid it across the gleaming mahogany expanse separating them towards Miss Sterling. This is him. My father, Thomas Miller. Miss Sterling plucked up the image, the lacquer of her flawlessly manicured nails catching the lamplight. The corporate mask she usually wore faltered, revealing a glimpse of something far more vulnerable. A shiver passed through her as she brought the picture closer, her gaze riveted to the buoyant grin of a younger man, his eyes alight with optimism and a mop of wayward, chestnut hair. Thomas? The name escaped her lips, a mere breath. Dusty watched, unease coiling in his stomach. He'd anticipated polite interest, a fleeting acknowledgement, not this profound, almost gut-wrenching reaction. Her eyes, typically sharp and assessing, now shimmered with an unexpected, crystalline sheen. Dusty, she began, her voice roughened with emotion. There's something you need to understand. Something I should have disclosed long ago. She paused, inhaling deeply, as if bracing herself against a tide of memories. Thomas Miller was my brother. The revelation struck Dusty like a physical blow. He lurched back, his chair skidding on the polished surface, an involuntary retreat from the impossible. What? That can't be true. It is, she affirmed, a steely edge returning to her tone. Thomas was my younger brother. He vanished years ago. We searched, endlessly, but never found a trace. Never understood what transpired. She returned her gaze to the photograph, her eyes lingering on his youthful likeness. He bolted when I was scarcely older than your daughter, driven by a youthful wanderlust. Dusty stared, his thoughts in disarray. This formidable figure, the indomitable CEO of Sterling Enterprises, was his aunt? The notion was ludicrous, unfathomable. Yet the weight of truth resonated in her voice, etched into the raw grief momentarily exposed on her face. He pictured Lily and the aching emptiness where a lineage should flourish. But why keep this hidden? Miss Sterling exhaled, a sound heavy with weariness, aging her in an instant. I needed certainty. Regarding you, your motivations. Decades I've spent searching, cherishing a desperate hope. When you presented yourself, bearing that box, I recognized a kinship in your gaze. The resolute set of your jaw, the inherent empathy in your smile. But I required corroboration. A reassurance that you weren't seeking to capitalize on a fabricated link. She extended a hand across the desk, hesitating just short of contact. Your father's departure left an unfillable ache within my soul, Dusty. An emptiness I yearned to remedy. Let me get to know you. Let me embrace Lily. If you're willing. An unexpected offer. The world swam. Dusty blinked, trying to focus on the ornate swirls in the Persian rug beneath Miss Sterling's polished shoes. A grandfather. He had a grandfather. And that grandfather owned all of this? He scrubbed a hand across his gritty eyes. He felt like he'd been running a marathon uphill, blindfolded, and now someone had just ripped off the blindfold and shoved a winning lottery ticket in his face. Only, instead of a lottery ticket, it was a truth he wasn't sure he wanted to cash in. Ms. Sterling watched him, her expression unreadable. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the distant hum of the city. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer than he'd previously heard it. Dusty, I understand this is a lot to take in. And believe me, a flicker of something that might have been pain crossed her face. I know it doesn't excuse the years, the lack of contact. He couldn't find his voice, couldn't form a coherent thought beyond the buzzing in his ears. He pictured Lily, her face streaked with crayon, chattering about her imaginary friends in their cramped apartment. This felt like a betrayal of that life, of the sacrifices he'd made to build it. Miss Sterling cleared her throat. I realize you need time, but I also wanted to offer something practical for you and Lily. She gestured around the opulent room. This house, it's far too large for one person. And frankly, a ghost of a smile touched her lips. It's far too quiet. I would be delighted if you both would consider staying here with me. Dusty stared at her, dumbfounded. Staying here? In this museum? With this woman? He could barely afford the gas to get to the next job, and she was offering him a room in what felt like a palace. I know it's sudden, she continued, her gaze unwavering. And I'm not asking you to make any permanent decisions about, well, anything. But consider it. Lily could have the run of the gardens, a proper bedroom. And you. She paused, searching for the right words. You wouldn't have to worry. About the rent. About anything for a while. Worry. God, the weight of that word. It pressed down on him, a constant ache in his shoulders, a knot in his stomach. He saw Lily's hopeful face, her bright eyes clouded with the same anxieties he tried so hard to shield her from. A garden. A real bedroom. A chance to breathe. But accepting this, accepting her offer, it felt like signing a deal with the devil. What did she want? What was the catch? He'd learned the hard way that nothing came without a price. I don't know what to say, he managed, his voice hoarse. Miss Sterling inclined her head. Say you'll think about it. That's all I ask. She walked to a nearby mahogany desk and picked up a small, silver-framed photograph. It was of a young woman, smiling brightly. Think about Lily, Dusty. Think about what's best for her. She set the photograph back down, her hand lingering on the frame for a moment. And then, let me know. Whispers and doubts. The murmurs began like wind-blown grit against the loading dock door. A low susurrus Dusty tried to drown out with the growl of the forklift. He focused on stacking the pallet of inventory, each lift a calculated movement. But the voices persisted, thickening the air like the acrid bite of battery acid. Pure favoritism, Marco grumbled, his voice a low rasp. Dusty's grip tightened on the forklift controls. They were dissecting him, he knew, scrutinizing Miss Sterling's interest. Probably blackmail material. Maria's rejoinder cut like shattered glass. Or maybe he's just irresistible. The sarcasm dripped. Dusty deposited the pallet, the machine's thrum offering scant comfort. He fought to ignore them, clinging to the familiar solace of isolation. But this felt different, sharper than the usual barbs. It felt like an indictment, smearing his already flawed history. He swiped at the sweat clinging to his forehead, the warehouse dust a gritty mask. He'd been a workhorse, arriving before sunrise, pushing past quitting time. He'd earned this. Hadn't he? A tendril of doubt coiled in his gut. Perhaps they saw something he didn't. Perhaps Sterling was playing favorites. The plum assignments, the expanded responsibilities, the pieces didn't quite fit. Marco's smirk caught his eye, a silent condemnation. Dusty looked away, the weight of their collective judgment a crushing burden. Later, alone in the break room, he stared into the murky depths of his tepid coffee. Sterling had been unusually effusive that morning, showering him with praise and dangling a high-stakes project. Of course, he'd said yes. He needed the cash. Lily desperately needed the cash. Now, the opportunity felt tainted, contaminated by suspicion. He closed his eyes, Lily's hopeful face emblazoned on his mind. He'd do anything for her. But was he prepared to barter his integrity? To become a puppet in Sterling's dance, whatever its steps might be? He replayed their interactions, her lingering gaze, the subtle undercurrent of something. Was it genuine admiration? Or was he merely a convenient tool? He'd always trusted his instincts, prided himself on seeing through artifice. But Sterling remained an enigma, a puzzle box refusing to yield. He emptied the coffee into the sink, the bitter liquid disappearing in a swirl. He had to know her game. He had to understand Sterling's motivations, even if it meant risking everything he'd built. He refused to let the whispers bury him. He would not be defined by their spite. Lily's charm. Dusty wiped his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of grime across his forehead. He hadn't expected Lily to visit him at Sterling Enterprises, but there she was, a splash of sunshine amidst the gray cubicles. He'd nearly had a heart attack when security buzzed to tell him she was in the lobby. Now, seeing her bright smile, the knot in his stomach loosened a fraction. "Daddy!" She launched herself at him, small arms wrapping around his legs. He knelt, inhaling the scent of her bubblegum shampoo. "I missed you." "I missed you too, Squirt," he said, ruffling her hair. "But you shouldn't be here. It's a busy place." Before he could elaborate, a voice cut through the air like a honed blade. "Mr. Miller, is this your daughter?" Dusty looked up to see Eleanor Sterling standing a few feet away. Her presence was as commanding as her reputation suggested. Immaculate suit, steely gaze, an aura of unwavering authority. He swallowed hard. "Yes, Miss Sterling." "Lily, this is Miss Sterling. She's the boss of everything here." Lily, unfazed by the intimidating CEO, peered up at her with wide, curious eyes. "Are you a princess?" Miss Sterling's lips twitched, a flicker of amusement in her otherwise composed expression. "Not quite. But I do run the castle." She knelt, bringing herself to Lily's level. "What's your name?" "I'm Lily," she chirped, offering her hand. Miss Sterling shook it, a surprisingly gentle gesture. "It's very nice to meet you, Lily. What brings you to visit your father?" "I wanted to see where Daddy works," she explained, then rummaged in her backpack. "And I brought my crayons." She pulled out a box, its contents a rainbow explosion. "Want to draw?" Dusty held his breath, expecting Miss Sterling to politely decline. Instead, she smiled. A genuine smile that transformed her face. "I would love to." She gestured towards her office. "Come, let's find some paper." Dusty trailed behind them, stunned. He'd expected a reprimand, maybe even a firing. Instead, Miss Sterling was ushering his daughter into her inner sanctum, the most powerful room in the building. Inside the office, a sleek, modern space with panoramic views of the city, Miss Sterling cleared a space on her massive desk. She produced a stack of pristine white paper and spread it out before them. Lily immediately began sketching, her tongue poking out in concentration. Miss Sterling watched for a moment, then picked up a crayon herself. It was an awkward start, her movements stiff, but soon she seemed to relax, a faint smile playing on her lips. Dusty watched them, a sense of disbelief washing over him. Miss Sterling, the Ice Queen of Sterling Enterprises, was drawing unicorns and rainbows with his daughter. He saw Lily point something out and Miss Sterling nodded, adding a flourish to her drawing. Lily giggled. The sound eased the tension that had been coiled tight in Dusty's chest. Maybe, just maybe, things were going to be all right. He still didn't trust easily, and Miss Sterling remained an enigma, but seeing the connection between her and Lily sparked a sliver of hope. He watched them, the unlikely pair immersed in their art, and for the first time in a long time, Dusty felt a flicker of something akin to peace. Attic treasures. The attic air hung thick with dust motes dancing in the lone shaft of sunlight piercing through a grimy window. The scent of aged paper and cedar was almost overpowering. Dusty coughed, pulling his t-shirt higher over his nose. Miss Sterling, surprisingly, was already up here, perched precariously on a wobbly stool, attempting to sort through a teetering stack of hat boxes. "Careful there, Miss Sterling," Dusty warned, his voice muffled. "Wouldn't want you taking a tumble." She straightened, a smudge of something dark across her cheek. "Just Eleanor, please, Dusty. And thank you. I've been meaning to tackle this archive for years. It seems to have conquered me instead." He surveyed the scene, a chaotic jumble of furniture draped in white sheets, stacks of yellowed newspapers tied with twine, and overflowing trunks. "Looks like it needs more than tackling. Looks like it needs a demolition crew." Eleanor chuckled, a surprisingly light sound in the stuffy space. "Perhaps you're right. I was hoping you might lend your demolition skills." Dusty grinned, the tension easing from his shoulders for the first time in days. "All right, Eleanor, where do we start?" For the next few hours, they worked side by side. Dusty, his inherent organizational instincts kicking in, began sorting items into categories. Things to keep, things to donate, things destined for the trash heap. Eleanor, meanwhile, unearthed treasures from the depths of trunks and boxes. "Oh my goodness," she breathed, holding up a faded photograph. "Look at this. My grandmother, Clara. She was quite the suffragette." The photo showed a young woman with fiercely determined eyes, holding a banner that read, "Votes for Women." Dusty took the photograph, his calloused fingers tracing the image. "Strong woman," he murmured, thinking of Lily. They unearthed more photos, each one accompanied by a story. Eleanor recounted tales of her adventurous great-uncle who'd sailed around the world, her artistic aunt who'd scandalized the family by running off to Paris, and her stoic grandfather who'd built sterling enterprises from the ground up. With each story, the imposing CEO faded away, replaced by a woman connected to her past, vulnerable and genuine. He found himself drawn in, asking questions, genuinely interested. It was a far cry from the stilted conversations they'd had before. Later, rummaging through a dusty trunk, Dusty pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden box. "What's this?" Eleanor took it, her fingers trembling slightly as she ran them over the smooth surface. That belonged to my mother. I haven't seen it in years." She hesitated, then carefully opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a single, perfect pearl necklace. "She wore it every day," Eleanor said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "My father gave it to her on their wedding day." She looked up at Dusty, her eyes glistening. "Thank you, Dusty, for helping me find this." Dusty simply nodded, a lump forming in his own throat. He understood the weight of memories, the power of objects to transport you back to a different time, a different life. He suddenly felt a profound connection to Eleanor, a shared understanding that transcended their different backgrounds and circumstances. The dust in the attic no longer seemed so oppressive, it felt like the gentle shroud of history whispering secrets of the past. A family dinner. The chipped ceramic plates, normally reserved for Sundays, sat gleaming under the kitchen's single overhead bulb. Dusty carefully arranged the cutlery, a simple set he'd inherited from his grandmother. Each placement was precise, a small act of defiance against the chaos that often threatened to engulf their lives. Tonight felt different, though. A good different. Lily skipped into the kitchen, her pigtails bouncing. "Is Miss Sterling here yet?" "Almost," Dusty replied, smoothing a stray strand of hair from her forehead. "Go wash up, sweet pea. Dinner's just about ready." The aroma of roasted chicken and garlic mashed potatoes filled the small house, a far cry from their usual fare of beans and rice. He hoped he hadn't overdone it. Miss Sterling, despite her wealth and power, seemed genuinely touched by simple gestures. Still, the knot in his stomach refused to completely unravel. Trusting felt like teetering on the edge of a cliff. A soft knock echoed through the hallway. Dusty took a deep breath and opened the door. Miss Sterling stood there, the streetlights catching the silver threads woven into her elegant shawl. But it was her eyes, warm and crinkled at the corners, that struck him most. "Good evening, Dusty. The house smells divine." Her gaze drifted past him, landing on Lily, who peeked shyly from behind his leg. "Hello, Lilybug. I'm so glad to be here." Lily, emboldened by Miss Sterling's gentle tone, rushed forward and wrapped her arms around her legs. "I drew you a picture today. It's of you and me and Dusty all flying on a unicorn." Miss Sterling chuckled, a melodious sound that filled the small space. "I can't wait to see it. Lead the way." At the table, Lily chattered excitedly about her day at school, recounting a story about a misbehaving hamster named Nibbles. Miss Sterling listened intently, her eyes fixed on Lily's animated face. Dusty watched them, a quiet warmth spreading through his chest. He hadn't realized how much he'd missed this, the simple joy of sharing a meal, of listening to Lily's endless stories, of feeling complete. And then Mrs. Gable said Nibbles ate her homework. Lily finished, giggling. Miss Sterling wiped a smudge of mashed potatoes from Lily's cheek with a napkin. "That Nibbles sounds like a handful." She turned to Dusty, her expression softening. "Lily tells me you fixed her swing set today. You're quite the handyman." Dusty shrugged, a faint blush rising on his cheeks. "It was nothing. It was everything." Lily interjected. "Now I can swing super high." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the clinking of silverware and Lily's occasional bursts of laughter. Miss Sterling's red heels clicked softly against the linoleum as she rose to refill their water glasses. The air felt different, lighter. The weight on Dusty's shoulders seemed to lessen with each passing minute. As Miss Sterling sat back down, she caught Dusty's eye. A genuine smile stretched across her face, a smile that reached all the way to her soul. In that moment, Dusty understood. She wasn't just helping them out of pity or obligation. She was searching for something too. And maybe, just maybe, they had both found what they were looking for.